of Officer Jamie Party on top of her in the lobby of the police headquarters. Cynthia Mulligan was not the only news reporter there that day. In fact, the entire media was gathered there for the meeting that Dion was trying to get access to. Yet, on September 21st, other than Cynthia Mulligan's tweet, there were no news stories, there was no anything. 2 weeks went by, and a number of us in the community organized a press conference to come to City Hall with Dion to say, this has happened, and we need to respond as community. It was only on that day, almost 2 weeks after the incident, when City News, CP24, CTV, they released stories about Dion's press conference, and suddenly they had all of this footage of the day that it happened. What were these media institutions going to do with that footage if we had never had a press conference?
Yeah.
Anything? Why did they wait? They literally were present for a crime. Like, what is our job in the media? What is our only job? It's to give you the news of what's happening that might affect people's lives, and they were right there to capture something which, in other circumstances, I'm telling you, they would be sitting in the newsroom and get a call and would get into their cars and race across town. Someone is attacked. We need to find out what happened, but it was right there. But because it was a black woman with a disability who needed to use the elevator, media professionals looked at that situation and said, there's not really anything here. This is not really news. Until we talked about it and made noise, and then they decided, okay, it's news. But then when the news story started coming out, we saw that as much attention as was being focused to the allegations that Dion made, there was also, well, this woman ran for city council, for the mayor of Toronto before, and she was disruptive at some of the public events that happened. So that's in a news story about a woman being sexually and physically assaulted. In fact, one of the reporters from CP24 who came to the press conference asked the first question at the press conference, and she asked Dion if she touched the officer before he assaulted her.
Shame.
I feel like probably I'm taking, already, we said 6 minutes, but the increased representation that we see of black individuals in the media today does not prevent things like what happened to Dion from happening. What I mean by that is twofold.
Good point.
Robin Maynard talked about this morning the fact that we want to end these systems. We don't want to just have oversight to respond to violence against our communities. We don't want the violence to happen in the first place, right? So we would hope that media reporting would get us to that point, and yet the media is full of the stories of the police brutality, of the child welfare system and the violence there, of the violence in our education system. That's not stopping the violence. That's one thing. But specifically now, when it comes to media, our presence as reporters, and much less often, let's be honest, as the editors who are making newsroom decisions, as producers, as news directors, our increased presence in these spaces is not leading to proper even coverage of our communities. So what are we fighting for? Why are we fighting to be visible and be in these spaces if when we get there, we're not able to actually influence how the news is being created, how stories are being told? This is why I value, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say, this is why I value social media, because social media allowed me and many other people who wanted to talk about what happened to Dion to do so, in spite of the fact that our mainstream media, who have millions and millions in resources, just chose, frankly, let's be honest, not to do their jobs. Social media allowed us to continue to get the message out regardless. This is why social media is valuable to me, and I want to close by reading you something that was posted on social media 2 nights ago while we were having our opening ceremonies. Quote, "I'm wondering what the fuck John Tory is being given a chance to campaign at the National Black Canadian Summit after his consistent track record of betrayal to Black communities, unquote. That is a quote from Sandy Hudson of Black Lives Matter Toronto. Sandy's name has been spoken a lot this week here, and BLMTO's name have been referenced a lot here. That same night that Sandy tweeted this, BLMTO actually received an award from this body. So let's talk about it, okay? We have to take to social media to say these things because we don't feel like any other way that message is gonna get out. And that's unfortunately, like, in order for us to be able to speak those truths, we shouldn't have to go to this outside place. I take particular offense to the fact that Mayor Tory was allowed to speak here.
What about Patrick?
Because this is the first time we've ever done this. And if we're trying to reimagine spaces for ourselves, having colonial greetings from a man who 3 years ago denied that white privilege even exists, I'm sorry. We could do better than that. We need to do better than that. And you guys may know that I left my position at the Toronto Star earlier this year because the Toronto Star interestingly said you can't be an activist and a journalist at the same time. This is a publication that has employed the likes of Naomi Klein, Michelle Landsberg, Catherine Porter, Craig and Mark Kielberger.
Oh yeah. White privilege.
It's really interesting how all these activists can be journalists and columnists at the same time, but I cannot.
Not you. Yeah.
So I had to leave, but starting my own media practice is something that I am working up towards. I'm also working on a book right now.
People will follow.
And I want to say that. I just want to say that we must create our own spaces if the mainstream media refuses, because it is honestly not good enough for us to get into places that won't even report on a Black woman being assaulted when it happens right in front of them. That's not what we're fighting for. So I left the Toronto Star. A lot of people thought, oh, that's a big loss of your voice. That was a really big platform. Not if they don't acknowledge my Blackness, honestly. And so creating other platforms, not just on social media, but for profit or community-based or non-profit or whatever different model you want to use for creating our own media, for telling our own stories, for finding our own audiences, instead of always trying to get on the biggest platform we can, regardless of what they're going to do for us, is something we need to move towards. And I very much look forward to being able to do that work with Black people in Toronto and in Canada, because it's needed not just in our city, but like everywhere. So that's all for now.